This is the Recover with God podcast, where we talk about recovery from eating disorders, disordered eating, diet culture, body image, weight struggles, over-exercising, and anything related to food and body that keeps you feeling trapped. The enemy wants to distract us with these struggles, and that is why recovery with God is so important. This podcast will point you to God and the hope and freedom we have through Jesus, whether you're here for your own recovery or you want to help someone you know. So let's dive in and hear what God has to say through this episode of the Recover with God podcast. Hey there. I am so happy you tuned in today. I'm Jayme, host of this podcast, and today I am chatting with Whitney Lowe. Whitney is passionate about the Bible and keeping our focus on God despite all the distractions we face in this world. She's the author of a 40-day devotional titled Set Your Eyes Higher, which is based on Colossians 3:2. Real quick, let me read you that verse in the NIV version. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. Keep listening to hear Whitney share more about what it looks like to set your mind and your eyes on God. Plus, you'll hear her own story of eating disorder recovery. It's a conversation I know is going to bless you in big ways. So here we go. Hey, Whitney, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. I've been so excited about this and praying about this and seeing where the Holy Spirit leads us. So I really appreciate your time and really grateful and excited to hear your story.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me and just for having a space where conversations like this can happen. There aren't a lot of them, actually. So I
Yeah.
think it's cool that you're doing this.
Agreed. I think just in the Christian space, talking about eating disorders and all of that is almost still kind of feels a little taboo at times, or people feel so alone in their struggles. And so I'm grateful that you have been talking about this too, and really excited to see where this conversation goes. But before we dive into that topic, I really want to ask you the question I ask every single guest on the show, because my favorite word is zeal, and I'm just really curious about what other people think about the word zeal. So, Whitney, I'd love to know, what does living with zeal look like in your life right now?
It looks different for sure. Our life has changed a lot, and I'd say it's a harder season than we've walked through in a while. And we've got two little kids and another one on the way, and it doesn't feel like waking up with a ton of energy, maybe the way that it used to. I think zeal looks like continuing to return to the calling that God has put in front of you, and to try to do that with like I'm trying to think of a less cheesy word, but like cheerfulness, like just allowing God to make those moments sweet, even when they don't feel like they should be. I feel like that's kind of been my zeal, is like waking up every morning and being like, I do not have the energy for this day, but we're gonna go like love on my kids and my husband, and we're gonna be we're gonna try to be excited to the most authentic capacity that I have in me at that moment.
Yeah, I like the word cheerfulness. I don't think it's cheesy at all, and I think it's a good point that you make, that zeal is a choice, right? It's not
Mhm.
something that you're just gonna wake up with every day because we're Christians, and that's just how it should be. Like, we do have to choose that, just like we have to choose obedience and, and looking to Jesus every single day. So I like that answer. I think it's, it's where you're at in life right now, and what that looks like. So thank you for that perspective. And now I'd love to open it up to you to share your story. Let's tell the listeners more about yourself, and yeah, I'll let you go.
Yeah. So my name is Whitney Lowe, and I currently live in Colorado. That's also where I grew up. But I would just say, especially as it pertains to disordered eating and that aspect of my life, I grew up a really like high achiever, just very aware of others' expectations of me. And, even now I'm like, I don't really even know totally a lot of the time how to conceptualize my identity apart from others' perceptions. So that's something that's just for whatever reason, like really deeply ingrained in me. And I'd say in high school, that looked a little bit more like trying to be perfect in academics and, making sure everything was like on my college application was like,
Mm,
you know, um, flawless. And then I do remember having like panic attacks that kind of started during that season of my life that felt just, I can't control the situation and I have nothing that I know what to do with it. And I'm unable to kind of rein these emotions in. And so that was sort of a fixture of my life, even through college. And then what I think I've realized recently is that response to feeling out of control sort of morphed into what would ultimately be the eating disorder I struggled with for the next number of years. Because I think when you realize you don't have control, but you're an achievement minded person, you're like, well, this isn't working. I got to find some way to
Mhm.
assert control over this
Oh, yeah.
situation. And what happened when I got to college, I went to a small Christian liberal arts college in Southern California, and I do feel like the stereotypes about California are very, very true. Where it's just a lot of really good-looking people and a lot of people with a lot going for them, and especially in that environment that was also Christian, I just remember this profound feeling of like not being unique or worthwhile in comparison
Yeah.
to these new people that I was meeting. I think I'd kind of found my niche in high school and felt like I was able to distinguish myself by my own efforts. And then I got to college and I was like, everyone here is a pretty high achiever. Everyone here is beautiful. Everyone here is a better Christian than me. I have absolutely no way of understanding why I would be special or important or worthwhile to someone else, or even to God. And so that, I think, is sort of where that desire to make myself feel worthwhile really ultimately came out in, okay, well, I can get some compliments from people for my discipline, for being really, really disciplined, going to the gym and eating really healthy. And my biology is, on the slimmer side. And so you kind of see those results quickly when you're trying to, depending on kind of how you're biologically wired, and started getting some positive feedback there. And then, you think that you have found a way to control the world around you, but really very quickly with disordered eating, I think you find out that you are being controlled.
Mhm.
You, I remember using this analogy, trying to explain it like, you think you're kind of getting on this merry-go-round as a Christian. You're like, I'm just gonna do this for a while because it makes me feel better. And everybody has hard seasons, right? So like this is kind of just my thing, but this is working for right now. And then when I'm done, I'll just hop off, and we'll be good. And
Mm.
really what you're doing with eating disorders and with saying yes to those really destructive tendencies is you're getting on like a one-way bullet train, like
Yep.
pretty quickly you're like, oh, I made the choice maybe to get on this train in some little way. At least that was the case for me. Like I kind of
Mhm.
knew these are not healthy habits, but um, you make that one step onto the train, and then before you know it, you're like so far away from anything or anything you know how to handle, and you are absolutely not in charge of that train. Um, and that I think is sort of where the Lord really graciously taught me about sin, because as a lifelong Christian, I really had never totally understood, like, I've never done anything like too bad, like I had mistakes, but I feel like I repented and made everything right and was like, I think I'm still pretty good. But sin's not just about you being like so, so, so terrible and dark inside. Sin is about like the choices we make that take us over and start to hijack our identity, and so many other terrible decisions in my own life and in my own relationships were catalyzed by that initial surrender of my identity to something lesser
Mm.
than God. And so I did find that all of a sudden I'm kind of caught up in some destructive tendencies around like alcohol, and I'm caught up in some really bad relationships, and my beliefs about God are a lot weaker than they've ever been because I made all this space for compromise in my heart. Um, and it was from that point forward that I feel like God really sort of started, bringing me out slowly but surely. And I would say my quote unquote recovery was triggered when I went on, it was, I guess, a mission trip. I think we called it something different, but it was a trip to Istanbul, Turkey, which at the time was going through a major refugee crisis. So there are a ton of like hungry women and children all around the city. And we were there to serve and help them. And one of the things we did was like a lunch and a play group for little kids. And I remember I was so lightheaded. Like I couldn't get up the stairs to get to the place because at this point I'm still really restricting calories and not taking care of my body. And I remember being like, I'm so hot. I can't do this. This is too hard. And then looking around the room and being like, and yet I'm also calling it noble and good to feed these people in this room. Like there's a real disconnect here for me of like
Uh,
why I would think that would be good for other people, but not for me. Like, is it because I think I'm better? Is it because I think I'm worse? Like what is that? And that was really the thought process that sort of triggered me. It's like, no, this is not how we are meant to live. This is not wholeness. This is not abundance. And in the next 6 weeks that I spent doing that project, God led me through the book of Hosea that talks about how God is so ruthless with our idols, and God is so ruthless even with those idols that we've integrated into our identity. And so it hurts a lot. It really, really hurts. But God has to, in love, extract those things from us. And I feel like He did a lot of that work when I was sort of isolated overseas, serving other people and trying to kind of get my priorities right. Because coming back, and I lived in California for a number of years, like, especially there, it's so easy to look around and be like, this is all that matters. And this is all real. The way that you look and the amount that you weigh, it's so meaningful. But what I realized on that trip was God has a lot more for me and this energy than just constantly fixating on calories and what I'm eating and what my body looks like. And also on that trip, I ended up gaining a lot of weight as sort of the Lord, ripped the stuff away from me. And I lost some control because I wasn't able to be as micromanaging with my schedule. And I
yeah.
got home and like people in my life still loves me. And I
Mm,
still had important stuff that God had called me into. And like actually the quality of my life only improved because I felt more capable to show up for it as I started caring for my body. And those two lessons, I think, were kind of the hinge points of really every other bit of recovery that has happened since. Is just realizing like this is too little. This is not important enough for you to compromise and waste your entire calling fixating on scales and calories and little tiny parts of your body that you're trying to perfect. So that's kind of, I'd say, the high level of my story.
yeah. It's so distracting, right? It's
Mhm.
just that's what the enemy wants. And um we're gonna get into your devotional book because some of the things that you just mentioned made me think of it. And that's something that I really want to talk about. But um I can relate to so much of your story as well, from like being that perfectionist in high school and really wanting to I don't know, be noticed or just like, try to find a way to have that control, like you said. And I can only imagine that people listening now, some of them are also resonating with that and thinking that's what I'm going through right now. So just the way that you described not only just that feeling, but also how God broke you from
Mhm.
that. It is thank you for sharing and in a practical way. And I love how gracious God really is with us, right? Like
Mhm. Yeah.
he doesn't quit and he's not, like talking about Hosea, right? And the
Mhm.
idolatry that we face. God's not necessarily gonna say, okay, well, just when you feel like it, he wants us to
Yeah.
address it now, but at the same time, he does it in such a gracious, loving way, even if we have grown up as Christians, which
Mhm.
I did as well, and in my own struggle. And so just yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And I
Yeah.
definitely love hearing a little more of the backstory behind your recovery because I know you mentioned that in your book. And so just kind of hearing a little bit more about what that looked like when you were in Istanbul is just really neat. And so I would actually like to hear more about your devotional book, Set Your Eyes Higher. I mean, I've read it, but you wrote it. So, you share in multiple chapters about your eating disorder. And based on your experience, and you've kind of touched on this already, but based on your experience, why does focusing on God matter so much? Not just in our life in general, but in the process of recovery.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's true that if we don't have our priorities right, I guess that's kind of where it all starts. Is like if you don't understand the things that are the most important and the things that aren't the most important, it's really hard to structure your life and to feel confident in the choices that you're making. And so we do, I think, kind of just, flounder around looking for something to attach ourselves to. So that's really the main idea is like if you are able to connect with God through scripture first thing every day, or at least at some point during your day, that is your anchor. That's something that will continue to remind you, like, hey, yes, the news headlines are really, really scary, but we know that this is true about God. And so let's think about these important and big things in the right order, let the peace of God rule in your heart first. And then we can talk about big, important things that are happening in the world. Likewise, your body is so important and your experience of your health is so important. But if you don't rightly understand that your identity is, to do good work that God has laid out for you in advance, like it says in Ephesians 2, like you are always going to be trying to figure out, how do I make myself meaningful? What am I supposed to be doing here? And our culture is every single time going to direct you back to the superficial aspects of existence. And I think there's a really, really deep spiritual war there. Um, but you have to be able to understand your embodied self through the lens of God's intention and design for you in order to tackle all that in a healthy way. So I think I just noticed how many different categories of my life were being co-opted by headlines or social media, or even just like the self-centeredness, like that sometimes if you're just left to your own devices, everything filters through you and not maybe God's greater purpose for your life, and God's who God is. So just acknowledging that there's so much simplicity in, let's first look at him and then filter everything else through what we know to be true about him and his plan for all of this. So that was the heart behind the devotional. Obviously in my story, my eating disorder was a really big point of learning many of these lessons. But even now, it's like a big focus was how stressful it is to like wake up every morning and be bombarded with another scandal, another problem, another headline, and then to feel like, what am I supposed to do about this? Like, how am I supposed to exist in this world when all of this is coming at me all the time? Like, okay, again, let's look at him first. Let's figure out, is there a place in my immediate community where I have actual agency that I could go out and help someone or love on someone or, impact this issue, whether it's like, right now, like immigration is a hot button. Christians were like, what do we do with this? Like,
Yeah.
it's so controversial. I'm not sure how to feel.
Mhm.
Are there people in your community that are touched by this issue that you can go try to love and serve and try to figure
Mhm.
out from that actual lived experience what you think, like what God's leading you into and teaching you, instead of trying to make sense of all of this in this like untouchable theoretical internet space where everyone is just so stressed all the time. Like
Yeah.
I just think that ability to set your eyes on Jesus first changes so much about the way you experience those other sources of anxiety, those other places that you want to be in control. So it's sort of split up into 4 sections, but the first one is identity and insecurity. And that's where I talk a lot about my own issues with body image and what have you. And then the next one is wisdom and humility, kind of reframing
Mhm.
what we actually can know so that we have the humility to again go to God first instead of trying to like inflate our own egos and feel like we have to be the expert in everything. Then the third section is capacity and burnout, because I think a lot of us again feel like even if you have recovered from an eating disorder, you still are always maybe going to have this little part of you that wants to perform your way into God's
Mhm.
favor,
Yeah.
perform your way into a life that is worthwhile, all of those things. And we will end up burnt out. We will end up still feeling that same kind of performance hangover if we're not coming from a healthy spot. And then the last section is on scarcity and abundance, because I think at the end of the day, kind of all of these things are wrapped up in, what do you think God's heart for you is? And if you think that you are scrounging through life trying to like get little scraps of his love for you and scraps of his favor and scraps of the abundance that maybe he has for others, you are never going to experience fully his joy for you. And the fact that like maybe you're going to find abundance in a life that doesn't look the way the world says it has to. Um, so those are kind of the 4 overarching sections, all based on Colossians 3:2 that says, since you've been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. So all of it falling under the authority of Jesus. But yeah, that's the devotional. It was really fun to get to explore that theme in so many different places in my own life, knowing that a
Yeah.
lot of other people are struggling with it too.
Yeah, as I read it, I definitely resonated with so many of the different examples that you used, and just it really did for 40 days. And I know obviously beyond 40 days, but that's a great place to start because I feel like 40 days is a good time period to really set
Mhm.
those habits in place, right? And I'm
Yeah.
sure that's probably what you were intending. And so just thinking, gosh, every little thing that starts to make me spiral or starts to make you just doubt and fear and worry, we have to turn to Jesus. We have to set our eyes on him and on the truth. And so those reminders were just so powerful. And I think sometimes we need those everyday reminders, right? Like the ones
Mhm.
that you use in the book where it's just like, hey, I'm going through life and I'm, this happens, that happens. It sometimes it's a big thing, sometimes it might be feel like a small thing, but it's still something that could derail us a little bit and
Yeah.
and have us start to think, just contrary to what God wants us to think about the world, about ourselves, about our purpose. And so I just thank you for for taking the time to write it because I know that writing a book is not something that comes, easily. It takes time. It takes dedication. It takes obedience. So thank
Mhm.
you for being obedient to writing that and being very transparent and open about your own struggles because that's not also not easy, but I think as Christians, like, the more we can do that, the better because I feel like we all feel so alone and siloed, and that's what the enemy wants. He wants us to think, "Well,
Yeah.
I'm the only one who's worrying about this. I'm the only one who's doubting, who's struggling, who, is
Mhm.
really is just failing in life," and that is so not true. So,
Mhm.
making that just more of an approachable conversation, I just thought that was really great, and, thank you for sharing more about your book. Um, and and also just I wanted to go back to what you said in your story earlier too about how you were feeling faint, when you were, in Istanbul. And this is a little bit off
Mhm.
topic of what we were just talking about, but I wanna address it real quick,
Mhm.
because I think that was such a powerful statement to make about how you felt in your body at that time, and you were trying to serve God, and you didn't feel equipped because you were not, fueling your body. And so just kind of even thinking through about how God designed us to use our bodies for his glory, for his purpose, but when we are not taking care of our bodies and we're not allowing ourselves to even have the energy to do what he calls us to do, like that's where part of that idolatry and that problem comes in. So,
Yeah.
um, so I wanted to like make that point, and then also kind
Mhm.
of ties into my next question about how does obsessing over our appearance and our bodies limit us as Christians? And I think I kind of answered my own question here a little bit, but I want to hear from you on what you think about that.
Well, and this is something I get so fired up about because I think the rates of, maybe not clinically diagnosable eating disorders, but for sure disordered eating habits. I feel like truly I'm like among young women that I know, it feels pretty near 100% with the groups that are coming up. Um, like the younger Gen Z women that I know. It's hard to find a young woman that doesn't feel impacted by this or go through a season of almost like experimenting with, does this work? Like
Mm.
would this fix this part of my life? And just to look at all those women and to look at like their giftings and I like, sorry, I get like emotional about this, but to like look at their giftings and to look at everything that God has equipped them with and like how amazing they are. And to be like, do not waste a second of your life on this. Do not waste a second of that big calling and a second of your giftings on like just staring at a scale or obsessing over calorie counting. Like gain 15 pounds, gain 20 pounds, gain 30 pounds, but like do that and live a full life of everything God's called you into, but don't compromise all of that, maybe for your entire life, maybe for 10 years. Don't set yourself back because this gets this grip on you, and that's just what I want to like. I want to shake every young girl that I kind of see starting to go down this path of like, you're gonna have to recover at some point, Lord willing, you know, and you're going to regret every second that you wasted on this. So, like, I know that it's not as simple as just setting your mind on, okay, fine, then I won't. I know a lot of people, it is really oppressive and it really is something that we need clinical and sometimes medication. Like, there's so much stuff that needs to happen. But I think a lot of the time we can disrupt some of these thought patterns really early on. And
Mhm.
if you believe the lie for any amount of time, it's going to be a lot harder to dig yourself out.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think that's something I just feel really strongly about. But in terms of specifics, I think it is just kind of like, okay, those moments when maybe you could be going out to coffee with a friend, like your brain is thinking, oh, I'm going to be around food. I'm nervous about that. So I'm gonna cancel. I'm gonna skip that. Or, you could go be in community and you could be celebrating a friend's birthday, but you realize, oh my gosh, there's gonna be like a lot of I remember like being stressed out about like chips, like
Oh,
there's gonna
yeah.
be chips there. Like I can't
Yep.
handle that. So I need to just like have discipline and like not go. Um, so making those choices that isolate you, I think, are one way that we really end up limited, because you lose perspective that you need
Mm,
from community and from other
yeah.
people to kind of keep you healthy and sane. um I also think, again, like, it's really hard for God's dreams for you to make their way into your mind. Like, you're not going to hear God's leading. You're not going to hear what God has designed you to do if you have the constant noise of, oh my gosh, I know that was probably like way more than I should have just had, or I haven't worked out yet today. Like it just puts so much noise in your brain that compromises your ability to discern where God is trying to take you. So again, I don't think there's any way to move toward God's purpose for your life and also be in a spot where you are, I want to say this gently, because I also think God's sovereign, and God makes all this happen, and this is a part of how God got me here to writing a book and to telling the story now. But like, I don't think you can do both at the same time. I don't think you can move toward God's purposes for your life while also entertaining the lies that this eating disorder is telling you. And so if you start to sense those having a grip on you, that's why I think it's so important to let other people in and to take it really, really seriously, and to let the Lord be ruthless in rooting out those lies in your life, even though it is painful. And the sooner you do that, the sooner I think you can get back kind of on course, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the Bible tells us we can't serve two masters. And kind of
Mhm.
going back to what you said earlier about idolatry, I mean, that's literally like it's like you're having another God before the true God, and that's your appearance or your weight or whatever you're fixated on. And so I think those are just really practical examples of what that could look like in a real world setting with, you're going to a party or you're facing, food, and instead of just avoiding life, um, dive into it. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I don't know about you, but something that I learned after recovery too was that, gosh, the as much time as I spent on trying to be the smallest person possible and thinking that was gonna make me happy, it actually made me so much more miserable in life. And the true happiness did come from gaining weight or just being at the weight that I was supposed to be at all along that, God designed for my body. And thinking, wow, I actually feel, you feel good in your body. You feel like you can live.
Mhm.
You're actually like living your life. And so I think
Yeah.
that's the goal, right? That's what God wants for us. And so
Yeah.
thank you for, yeah, sharing a few ways of how that can look and how we can break those chains and find freedom. So,
Mhm.
um, and then kind of thinking through kind of our value and our worth in the eyes of God. What would you tell someone if they just said, "Well, what does it mean, like to think that I have value in God's eyes?"
I mean, that's a big question. And I think it's a question that a lot of us will be trying to answer, because it's such a crazy thing to imagine like we would be worthwhile and valuable
Mhm.
to God that's this big. And I don't know if that totally makes sense to our brains as humans all the time or ever. Um,
Yeah, it's a
but
lot to fathom for sure.
but I do think that passage, I think it is in Ephesians 2 again, like, you are God's masterpiece. You are God's workmanship in some translations. Like, and he has a purpose for your life. He designed you to do good things in the world for other people. Um, I think even just embracing this idea that God has purpose for your life and that God has a unique plan for you. I mean, I think you can also reference where it talks about in the Bible, how we're all members of a body and we all have kind
Mhm.
of different tasks that we are designed to perform well for the good
Yeah.
of the body overall. Like, it is not a jump at all to believe that God made you with such specific purpose that he needs you to be healthy and he needs you to do things the way that he designed for you to do them. And I don't mean need like God can't accomplish it any other way. I just mean like in order for the way God wants it to work, we have to be okay saying, okay, your way is better than my way. And your way of me achieving significance in this whole thing is always going to be better and more fulfilling and more abundant than the way that the world is telling me or the way that I have convinced myself is going to work. And that's just, I think, a fundamental moment of surrender, like surrendering to the
Mhm.
fact that I don't totally get why you care this much about me, God. But like, I believe that you're real and I want to do things the way that you have designed for me to do them. And I want to experience the abundance that you've promised me. And so, maybe even more so than like totally understanding your worth or meaning, it's this surrender to whatever it is that God has for you, and knowing that he designed your heart to be the happiest and most fulfilled there and not here. Because I think the one backwards blessing of eating disorders is that it's real hard to fool yourself into believing that this is abundance, right? It's really
Oh, yeah.
hard to look at the way that you feel and the way that you're going through the world and saying, yep, this is good. I mean, you're in such a literal sense. Like, so much of scripture is this metaphor of like a feast that we're invited into, right? And you're like, no,
Yeah.
no, no, I'll stay here. I'll stand outside. I'll stand outside the door, God. Like, I don't want the abundance of that feast because that sounds scary and that sounds like it's out of my control. So
Yeah.
you can't really fool yourself into thinking, yeah, this is absolutely the fullness God designed for me. So then you have to answer the question, why do I think I shouldn't be able to participate in that? Why do I want other people, as a Christian, right? Like, we're supposed to be spreading the gospel. We're supposed to be inviting people into that feast, but we won't let ourselves
Oh,
indulge in it. We won't let ourselves
yeah.
have it. I think you have to answer that question. And again, a lot of that is because God loves me and cares about me. But some of that is just, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to the feast. I'm going to enjoy the abundance. I'm going to stop controlling. And I'm going to see if I experience the Father's love there instead of, I need to totally understand why I'm invited first. So,
Mhm.
like, I think there's a lot of really beautiful metaphors that I think people who struggle with this should dive into and explore in the Bible that have to do with food and abundance and God's favor that I think we need to contend with really intentionally.
Yeah, I like that you brought up just kind of digging into the root of why do we think maybe we don't deserve something, but also it's so true. It's so true when you are in the thick of an eating disorder and maybe at the beginning you don't really recognize it at first, but once you've had disordered eating or an eating disorder for any kind of length of time, you do start to see, wow, I'm not living. I'm not I'm not thriving. Like the people around me seem like they
Mm.
are enjoying life and I am truly not, even though I don't ever want anyone to know that I'm not enjoying life. But that's kind of how it feels. And you then start feeling really trapped in that situation. And I don't know about you, but I kind of got to a point where I thought, well, is this just how my life is going to be forever? I mean,
Mhm.
is this all there is? And no, that's not all there is. And God has so much more for us. And He's inviting us to that table, like you said. And I think just knowing like we are the ones holding ourselves back from his
Mhm.
abundance. So yeah, I think those are just really great points.
Yeah.
Um, and then I know we talked about Gen Z a little bit earlier, but from your book, I know that you were also just very passionate about like mentoring teen girls. Um, and for that generation, what is some advice that you would give to the girl or even a woman who's not Gen Z? But what would you say if they're struggling with confidence, body image, or just not feeling like they're enough?
Mm. Well, the thing that keeps coming to my mind is just that I think our culture has made it really easy to gaslight yourself into believing you're enjoying your life if you can get the photo, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
I didn't have fun here, but I had a good photo, or like, I'm not actually
Mm,
happy and I'm not actually enjoying abundance in my life and I don't feel good about anything, but I looked really, really good in that picture. And as long as other people see that and I can see that, then like that's good enough, right?
yeah.
Um, I think I would really just caution all of us, but especially these younger women, like, do not let that photo op or that, whatever content you got out of it that painted a certain picture, like, do not let that be the thing that convinces you you're okay
Mm.
for another however long, like
Wow, yeah.
your life can look really good from the outside and you can be withering, and you will still have to contend with that eventually. You are not fixing anything, you are not pushing anything off. Like, if anything, you're going to make a deeper hole because you'll get affirmation, you'll get a lot of the affirmation you're after
Mhm.
from random strangers. Um, so I think it's just it's a little bit tough love, but like, don't let the, the photo ops gaslight you into a
Yeah.
happiness that you don't have. Um, and then, yeah, I think again, it's just that overall message of like, you have a lot more to offer because I know God has put more in you than fixating over, a couple percentage points of body fat. Cause that was always kind of my trigger, was like needing to feel like I was in a certain range. And
Mhm.
man, what a waste. What a waste of like 4 years of a really great education that I ultimately didn't learn a lot of because I was so focused on something else. And God will get you where he wants you to go. But yeah, don't waste what he's given you.
That's a really good visual, I think, of that, whether you're on Instagram, TikTok, wherever, but that those Instagrammable kind of moments that we think, well, this is just showing people like I've got it all together. Or, this is the highlight reel of my life, and I think we all see a lot of people's highlight reels, and that kind of makes me think too, like when you see someone else's great photo on social media or wherever, that doesn't always mean that they're happy either. And not to say that
Mhm.
every happy photo has sadness behind it, but even
Right.
just to not even compare to other people's great photos either, whether you're looking at your own life or someone else's, that we don't know the full story behind any one photo or video that we see
Mhm.
anywhere from anyone. And yeah, I think that that definitely hits home because for me, I used to travel a lot before I met my husband, and we still do travel, but there were times when it was like, "Oh, I've got to get this photo. Like I'm in this incredible place." And then later I'm like, "Did I really even enjoy that spot that I was in?" As you're looking at the
Yeah.
photo later, I'm like, "Well, I've got this great photo, but what I really want is their memory of being there." And I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that I'm less and less about, "Oh, I've got to get this perfect photo." And I'll take some photos, but it really is just about the experience, and that's what's going to stick with you,
Mhm.
for the long term. And who cares about what other people think about your photos?
Mhm.
That's just really not important. And I hope, yes, as people are listening to this, that they realize that it does come with age a little bit too, I think, but like it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So
Well, and it's such a workaround. It's like on one hand, you're either going to get not the response that you wanted and you're going to feel like you're worthless,
yeah.
or you're going to get a great response to something that isn't authentic to your identity a lot of the time,
Hmm.
you know? At the
Yeah.
same time, I mean, like I will post a picture of like my newborn, like that's an authentic moment that like I think is
Sure.
worth celebrating. But
Absolutely.
there's so many different points in that process that tap into our desire to control, whether it's like we're going to edit this photo to high heaven to make it look a certain way,
Oh yeah.
or then you get a ton of likes and you're like, wow, I must be
Hmm.
doing right. I must be doing good. Like, so I
Yeah.
think when you start tying that stuff up with like people who have body image hangups, um, or disordered eating, it's like really dangerous. And I just don't think women are often leaving their guard up in the way that they should around those
Mm.
spaces. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big one.
Yeah, it also just made me think too that sometimes if you do say doctor up a photo or you get all those likes and comments, that eventually it's not going to be enough. You're going to want more, more, more. But on the other side of
Yeah.
it too, if you say, "Oh, well, everybody likes this photo, but man, I really filtered it." Then you're like, "Well, they really wouldn't like the real me." So it still leaves like
Right.
this emptiness of, well, they like the filtered version of me, but I still have to hide who I really am. So, yeah, I
Mm.
think there's just like a lot to think about there. Um, and I'd like to know too, for anyone listening who might be in a spot where they're mentoring younger generations, what advice would you give them as they're doing that?
Mm. I think being really committed to gentleness and truth simultaneously
Mm.
is really essential because I think, again, sort of going back to all the stuff, all the ways that we're convinced we can understand everything fully. I know a lot of Christians who are feeling, maybe a little like attacked by the state of the world and by all these things that are coming up at our youth specifically. And that's very scary. It's very threatening because there's a lot of dark stuff, right?
Oh yeah,
Um,
every day.
but I think it's a lot. But
Yeah.
I think if you adopt that stance without the humility of, first of all, there's nothing new under the sun. There's a different version of this that attacked my generation too.
Mm.
Maybe it just went under the radar,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Being aware of that is really essential. And so I think that humility breeds gentleness in the way that you deliver the truth that needs to be delivered.
Okay.
And I see a lot of people my age and older who are mentoring who come at it so like aggressively, like,
Cool.
oh, that's a lie. That's not true. This isn't biblical, whatever. And it's like, no, I know. You can say the same thing you're trying to say with tenderness. And I think I've just learned that, yeah, Gen Z is a lot more receptive to that relational gentleness than it is to you young kids with your crazy things and all this, you know what I mean? And
Yep.
I think you need to be bold, but I'm really convinced that you can be bold and gentle at the same time. So whether that has to do with things in general or disordered eating that you're trying to counsel someone through. Um, I think that combo of humility and boldness is pretty essential.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Gentleness and boldness. I love juxtapositions, and I think that there's room for both for sure. I personally have not really had a chance to mentor younger generations, and so I was honestly looking for advice for myself too. So thank you for sharing that and just your perspective on working with, Gen Z or just, you know, girls in general who are, you know, trying to navigate this world because it's such a challenge right now. And, and every generation has its challenges. So that, like you said, nothing new under the sun, but it just can look a little different depending on where we are in history. So, um, yeah, I think there is that just innate response in us to want to just say no, no, no. Like even if you've got really good intentions, like no, that's just like not the way it is. And I just really want you to know. But at the same time, like
Mhm.
being open to having those conversations, like, hey, well, like why do you think that? Or
Mhm.
let's talk about how you're feeling. Because I don't know if this is something you've encountered too, but I feel like in general with like feelings, sometimes we feel like, well, I'm not allowed to feel that way. So I'm just not going to talk about how I feel. And not to say that we want to be dictated by our feelings, but it is a window of opportunity to see, well, let's get a little introspective and see like why
Mhm.
do we have these thoughts? So yeah, thank you for sharing that advice. I hope it helps someone who's listening who might be in a spot where they are talking to younger women and they just
Yeah.
want to make sure that they approach it in the right way. So
The thing I would just add is this generation is so relational. And I think we put this pressure on like needing to know the answers or say the right thing or tackle the right
mm,
conversation. And that can be valuable. But I think people are just hungry for real health, like to see people who are living in health. And our
yeah.
culture does this weird swing between completely restricting and over exercising and whatever to then also like overindulging and having no
Mhm.
limits whatsoever around how we
Yeah.
see health. And um, that's not biblical either. So to
Mm,
just see people who are living in health and abundance and doing it in a way that is life giving, like your presence is so valuable and you engaging in those relationships is so meaningful. So I think even just like finding the youth pastor at your church and being like, do you need help? Like they totally do. They need healthy adults who are present and willing.
mm.
And God does kind of the rest from there. So I would really just encourage anyone who has that on their heart, like just start and see what God does. Like it's not as high pressure as it feels.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great advice too for especially even for me, for someone who's like, oh, like I'm afraid of, saying the wrong thing and influencing in the wrong way. So, but just knowing that like with good intentions that God will honor that and use it
Yeah.
and let the Holy Spirit work through you. So, thank
Mhm.
you for adding that. I love that that was just something God put on your heart to share. And now I'd love to ask if you have any final thoughts that maybe we didn't cover. Um, or any
Mhm.
or ways that, even listeners can connect with you.
Yeah, well, I've always got a lot of thoughts. I feel like I never stop thinking. But I do love to sort of engage in these conversations with people. And I would just say, I mean, it's interesting to even think now, like I'm pregnant with my third child, and I really do feel like I have been so fully restored and healed in this department in a lot of ways. And yet, this very week, I've had a couple of people comment on how big my belly's getting. And it like triggered something in me. And so I
Oh,
think I've just been really struck with like, wow, like we need to be intentional. If this is something that you struggle with, it's probably not going to completely dissolve into thin air,
mhm.
and or you will go through seasons of feeling really really restored and healthy, and then the enemy will still find a way to kind of get wiggle into your brain again
Yeah.
and start planting those same seeds, because there's some vulnerability from whatever you've been through in your life that will maybe always exist. So just to encourage people to, again, like putting off dealing with this stuff doesn't serve you. There will come a point when you are healthy, Lord willing, that you look back and you regret every second you wasted, or that maybe another version of this attack comes back around and you're going to have to face it. So like the sooner I think that we really just let God do his work in our life and we let other people in, um, the better. And there absolutely, I promise you, is a version of you in the future that is so proud of you for doing that right now. um that, yeah, I think I hate seeing women give that time away.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's my last thought, but I would love to connect with people. I talk about this a good amount. I have another book coming out next year that gets a little bit more into the weeds with some of this. I'm kind of nervous about it. But I'm mostly on Instagram at Whitney Pearson Lowe, and yeah, excited to connect with some people.
Yeah, I will definitely share that in the show notes along with a link to your book because I would definitely recommend everyone grab that and read it and just know that it's going to point you closer to God and keep your focus on him in these challenging moments, whether that is with an eating disorder, disordered eating, body image, there's everyday life stuff that we all go through. So
Yeah.
I think that's great. And I will be praying for your next book coming out. I know that is a very scary
Thank you.
thing. So but obviously I think that when we feel the most fear about something, that's probably when it's the most needed for the world to hear. So, appreciate you being vulnerable to go there and talk about the hard things because I know that's just something that we all need more of. So, thank you, Whitney, for your time, for your insight, for your sharing your story, and I really pray that it resonates with someone listening, multiple people listening. So, appreciate you.
Thanks, Jayme.
Hey there, it's Jayme again, and you made it to the end of this episode of the Recover with God podcast. I pray that God is speaking to your heart right now and that you go on with your day feeling less alone. If you haven't already, I hope you hit that follow button to subscribe and receive notifications for future episodes. And did you know that if you leave a quick rating or review, you can help more people find this podcast too? God designed us for community, so follow along and help others do the same to feel less alone together. I hope you tune in next time, and until then, you can always catch up on any past podcasts you might have missed. P.S. I'm cheering for you.